I'd also just like to remind everybody, if we are recording this, we will share a link on the slides at the end of the presentation. And if you do have any questions as we go through, feel free to pop them in the chat as we go through, so that they get logged, and we'll answer them at the end. We've got a special section at the end. Or alternatively, if you do want to unmute yourselves when we ask the questions at the section at the end, happy to do that. So David, I think you might need to unmute yourself, but other than that, I'll pass over to yourself, and we'll get straight into it.
Great, thanks a lot then, Michael. I'll just check you can all hear me. Gives a thumbs up. Yep.
Right.
Great. Well, welcome to the next in the Innov8 Insight series. Michael's been telling me about some of the ones you've already had. I'm coming to you live from Newcastle's head office. So as you can probably tell, my accent is, I'm from Newcastle. So you'll have to listen doubly hard, I think, to be able to understand us, which isn't a bad thing. It means you'll have to pay attention. So I'll just move it on and we'll get started. So I'm product marketing manager for Ch200 and X3, and I've been at Sage for 16 years. In that time, that's included supporting Ch200 with the business partners, training on Ch200, and doing enablement with the partners as well. So I've worked with Innov8 in the past. I've worked with Natalie in the past actually as well. So I know the partner channel very well. I've spent a long time at Sage. I know it doesn't look like I'm old enough to have 16 years at Sage, but I just about am. And I'll quickly talk to you just before we get started. Hopefully you've all got a coffee sitting comfortably. I'll talk to you a little bit about what a product marketing manager does. So at Sage, my role, it involves basically getting to customer problems. So when we look at solutions, we always look at what problem does it solve. So if we're talking about what we're looking at today, which is the new features to 2022 R1, the question we would have asked is how does that impact customers and how does it help them? What we then do is we then look at ways to be able to talk about that to new customers and existing customers, and of course to partners, because they'll then be able to relay the message. But what's really good today is I'll get to talk to you directly about that. So as well as doing that, we also bring together the departments within Sage, and we'll pull them all together, and then we'll do the go-to-market and release the product. So that's a little bit about me, a bit about what I do at Sage. What I'm going to do now is going to move on to what we're going to cover today. So welcome and introduction. I've just done that. Next bit, and this is going to be the main part of it, is going to be on what's new. So what's new in 2022 R1? What are the new features that we've got? I'm in quite a fortuitous situation where I've trained on it in the past. So I thought what I'd do, as opposed to talking around it, is actually just go in and do a little demo of what it looks like. So you'll all be familiar with what Ch200 looks like, and I'll take you through how you would go in and how you would use the new features that we've got. After that, we'll look at TLS. So if you've got an older version of Ch200, TLS might be or should be something you'll have heard about, and Innov8 will have talked to you about that. I'll give an update on that, and then we'll do Ch200 Rule Map, and then a question and answer session at the end. So what I'll do now, there's the new features, but I'll jump straight into our Ch200 product and I'll take you through what they are. So the new features are sales orders and quotations, web-enabled forms. So the purpose of this is obviously when you're out on the road, if you've got an iPad or you've got another device, you'd be able to go in, access sales orders, access quotations, and be able to do it for the customer there and then. And to be able to do that, just click on the cog at the top, click on Show Web Portal and Browser, and that will open up the web portal. Now I think we've got to over 30 screens now that we've got that are web enabled. So we're adding to those all of the time, and that's going to continue as time goes on. Now, just while I'm in here, there's a couple of bits that I want to talk about. We've got Sage City. So I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but that's our online community. You can go into there and you can access the Sage 200 part. You can talk to other customers. I really like the top one on there. Would you like to help shape Sage 200? So there's an opportunity there for you to go in and to put some views down. What we've also got is what's just launched. So that's what I'll be talking about today. So this will take you through what we've got coming up on Sage 200. Next bit, have your say. This is where you can actually give us some feedback. There's a very simple form to fill in at the very bottom. We can put in your name, organization, and give us the feedback directly. That comes through straight to Sage. And the final part we've got is what's trending. So this is the help center. So if you're looking for some support, we've got articles that cover all of the issues or any help that you might need within Sage 200 as well. So I thought I'd do a little bit of promotion there. Before I get started as well, when I finish the call, I'll put into the chat, or just before the end, we've got a YouTube channel that we actually put all of the training material on. And it's got I'll just show it there actually. It's got all of the latest releases on. And it's been done by Peter, who was somebody I used to manage, who puts together all of the videos. I think a good thing to pull out is they're quite short, quite easy to watch. So as I'm going through the demo, and I'll show you what's available and why we've put it in there and what I think it benefits you. If you need more detail, this is the place I would recommend to come. If you want to watch a 3-minute video, if it's standard that you're using, or if it's the full professional version, you can watch it there. It's 7 minutes, so it doesn't take very long. This is a playlist that covers all of the Sage 200 updates, so it's got everything that's available. So if you go back through, you'll be able to see the different versions that have been released. And I've always wanted to say this, you can just click subscribe. And of course, you get set up with updates if there's a new video that comes out. So we'll get started. Sales order processing and quotations. Now, I've set one up already. So this is a new quotation. Now, this is exactly the same as the sort of screen you'd see in Sage 200. The options you've got on there are very familiar. You'll notice you can copy the quote. You can create a new customer on the fly because that's using an original web form. You can also put on an expiry date for the quotation itself. And as you scroll down, you've got suggested items. Now, I'm not sure if people are familiar with this, but I'll quickly go in and show you. So this is the same as you've got in sales order processing. On the desktop version, you've got in the web enabled, and it will bring up the items that this customer have bought in the last 30 days. So the same as it does, always worth reminding people about that because I think it's a handy one to use. So you've got the suggested items. If I scroll down, you then add your stock codes as you normally would, put in a quantity. You have the alternative and you have a cross sell. So these are new features again, or relatively new within Sage 200, but they exist within the web enabled form as well. If you click on the cross sell, whatever the stock item is, it will bring up whatever you've loaded as being the cross sell for this item. Add it in, add it to the quotation. And there you go. You've now got the 2 items on the quote, and you're able to add any more items you want to on there. It's also got the different types of stock items. So you've got your standard, you've got your free text, and you've got your charge and comment. So everything that you've normally got. You've also got a memo field as well, which we've added on. So of course, if you want to make notes about the quotation, then you'll be able to do that and add it onto there. Keep it for later. Now, if I save the quote, then tells me quote number, as you'll be familiar with. I go back into sales orders, go into inquiries, look at the view quotation. I'll be able to see the quotation status. So if it's still live, great. if you've lost it, you'd be able to report on that as well. So we keep a track of that quotation. I haven't entered an expiry date, but of course you could do that as well. And it's got the items on there. If I'd had a memo, it would have had that on as well. So that's everything for the quotations. Now, if I go to a sales order, the screen is exactly the same. You can do everything that you could do. So if I was to choose a customer, and then go down, choose a stock item, it has all of the options on there. So you've got your alternatives, you've got your cross-sell, and you'll be able to save this. Save it as a PDF, and you can then send it to your customer. And that's the same for the quotations as well. You can save those as a PDF and email it over to your customer and send it straight from here. Once you've done all that, last thing to mention, you can move these around as well. So if you're always going to do a cross-sell, you might want to move that one back across to the start, and they're all customizable. Just means you can keep it looking and feeling how you want it to work. So if you think about it from the perspective of selling to a customer, this is the screen you might want to see. You want to decide that you're going to have cross-sell and alternatives right at the start, so that it comes to your, so that you're able to do that as part of what you do when you're talking to the customer. So if I then go back into here, I'll refresh the list. You've then got the new quotation that exists on there, as it does in normal Sage 200, and it's put it in. So that's everything on the new features. That's the sales orders, the SOP, and the quotes. What I would say, as again, would be to have a look at the videos. So go into YouTube, subscribe to that, and have a look, and that'll take you through in a bit more detail than I've just done there. So next bit, talk about TLS. TLS is something we've communicated out to the partners and we've communicated out to customers, and it's impacting customers who are on versions 2013 up to spring 2019. And what I would say is if you think you're on an older version of Sage 200, be to contact Innov8, because depending on which version you're on, that will have an impact on what you need to do as a customer and what your options are as well as part of that. There are some updates available for the newer versions of the software. And TLS, this is something that Sage 200 uses to contact the Sage license server. So I've put on there what happens if I do nothing. What happens if you don't actually act on this? Well, from the 30th of September, the TLS, which is, it's not a Sage, it's not something Sage have produced. This is something Sage takes advantage of. So it uses that to be able to control the security across a network. But it will mean that you won't be able to access your software after the 30th of September. Well, you'll have 30 days where it will still be able to access, but after 30 days, after the 30th of September, you won't be able to access it. So it's really important that you contact Innov8 if you've got an older version and you've got any concerns about it, and they will be able to tell you and talk you through what you need to do next. And the last bit I'm going to move on to, Ch200 Rule Map. So I'm not going to go into these in any detail. I'm just going to talk very high level about what's coming up next. It's going to be a continuation on, so we're going to go through and continue to move parts of Sage 200 as web enabled, so you'll be able to see more and more. So things like, and I don't want to commit to this, but it could be maybe dispatching sales orders, allocating, so you can actually do that full process and work through and send out the sales order as part of web enabling. Those are the sort of things that we'll be looking to do. We'll also be looking to take advantage of the API. So the API is what, I know you've had these series where you've had Dracer come in. They would take advantage of something like that, where they're able to push and pull data in and out of Sage 200. And it means that, yes, you've got the standard Sage 200 product, but you have add-ons that are able to make it more than it's been. And this has been something that we've always had with Sage 200. We have a really established ISV community that are able to make these add-ons and actually make it work for vertical specific propositions. So what do I mean by that? Well, it's manufacturing is a good example of one. We've got a API that will work with manufacturing, and you'll be able to add that on and make the most of that. And we'll continue to work on those, and that's the third point on there. And I think that's everything I'm going to cover. So it was a quick whistle-stop tour. Michael, I don't know if there's any questions come through, anything you want to ask?
No, I think we'll just pause for any questions, and I'm sure people will probably processing some of that. But a couple of questions from me, maybe whilst we wait for a bit of extra insight, was obviously the web-enabled forms that you've shown us in terms of kind of utilizing those, you know, are they mobile optimized? So can people use them on a tablet or a mobile device? And also, how's that licensed for the effectively non-Sage or Sage users?
Web-enabled forms are available on a mobile app, I think, and for iPads. I think I'd probably be realistic about maybe creating a quote or a sales order on a phone, but you might look at the inquiry screen, you might have a look and see where you're up to with an order or something along those lines. So yeah, definitely work with those. That's the whole purpose of it. It's just to make it easier for customers when you're out with your customers and talking to them, you're able to access the device and start to build a quote and send it out to them there and then. As far as the users, so do you mean non-Sage users, so web users? Yeah. Yes, so that's what it is. We're looking at the users at the moment, but at the moment it would be a web user that you would use for that, and you'd be able to access it using the web user.
Just wondering if there are any other questions that people have.
I think just on the web portal side, that's actually probably the first time most people on this session have seen the web portal. So I know we went into quotes, but obviously with COVID, we didn't manage to do a release last year, which is when they introduced it into professional. I just wondered, Damien, if you'd just be able to not necessarily talk through them, but click through a couple of the screens in the portal just to show the guys. So for anybody listening that goes on to a version newer than, I think it was introduced in 2021 R2, 1 or R2. But what Sage are doing here is putting it all, the end goal, as Damien mentioned, is to put as much of the Sage functionality from the desktop application into a web browser so that the solution will work on different platforms. The quotes is the latest one to be added, but there's a whole load of areas around customers, suppliers. There's a couple of stock screens in there now, orders, you know, so the benefit of, as Damien said, you know, the ability for somebody not in Sage to be able to place a sales order. That person could be sat in front of a customer and actually place an order in the web portal without needing to be on the server potentially and not a Sage user, so they can do that from anywhere, and it's all linked into Sage. So if they've got a price in the price list, that all pulls through as though you're entering it in Sage as well. So it's a massive new thing that we probably a lot of you haven't seen yet, and are wondering potentially about what it is about. The quotes, like I say, is the new bit, but the portal itself will be new to probably everybody on this call. I would expect.
Right, Chris, right? That's a really good point then. So yeah, absolutely. I've just been sort of moving down the list there, but you've got your sales ledger, your purchase ledger, nominal ledger. We've been moving these screens in, and Chris, you're absolutely perfectly right. You know, the idea is that you can sit with a customer out of the office and access it on an iPad or whatever it is, a device, and you don't need to have full access to Sage 200. So yeah, just going back a little bit to give a bit more detail around this, that was the purpose. So all of these screens here, the sales ledger, the nominal ledger, the cash book, even, you can go into your bank account list and see where you're up to with your bank. Now, this will depend on what access you've got. And the other point that you made, Chris, about when you create a new sales order, if you've got a customer who is on hold, it will pull that through and it will tell you. It will say the customer's on hold. Are you sure you want to go ahead with this? So if you've had issues with credit terms and things like that, and you've put them on hold in Sage 200, it pulls it through. It's perfect for those scenarios.
Highgroves have just asked, and I can answer this. So you have a bespoke pricing table per user. Will this work out the box? If not, can it be made to work? So at the minute, what I would say is the web portal is standard Sage. So anything in it is just standard. If you have any bespoke fields, any bespoke, it won't come through into the portal. But obviously that's bespoke we've written for you. We're working with Sage at the minute while Sage enable their ISV community like us, the development community, to be able to start writing our bespoke into these screens. So at some point there will be an element of, like you have your recompiles with your upgrades, there'll be at some point a point where we will recompile that work into the web portal and then it will work. But at the minute, anybody with bespoke on the order screens or any of these screens wouldn't see that bespoke work working on these screens, just in a response to the question. The other thing that's quite good, Damien, I don't know if you can pull it up just while you're showing your screen, is if you actually Google Sage 200 roadmap, you can actually see what's going on with the roadmap as well on there. So if anybody is particularly interested in what Sage are doing, there's a link here, you did point it out actually.
Yes.
So there's a link on the web portal page that you can click through and see kind of what Sage are doing, what's coming up in future releases, and there's link throughs to Sage City for ideas and things like that. You know, these things are, as Damien said, things that customers have suggested. You know, Sage are very much listening to the customer, and you know, any good suggestions you've got, people will upvote them and things like that in the Sage City, and Sage are constantly monitoring that and building their roadmaps going forward.
And Sage City is monitored as well by the customer service team, so we're trying to give feedback from anything from the issues. But you're right, it's all of Sage are inputting into that. So I'm sat opposite the product manager, and she'll be on there as well. You've got the likes of CRM, so David Beard, who looks after CRM for Sage, he also makes comments and goes on to there. So that community is really important, and you can upvote what you would like to see next year, right, Chris? Excellent way for us to get feedback direct from customers.
So we will share a recording of the session, and obviously we'll generate a quick look for those links that Damien's mentioned into Sage City and the roadmap, so you can quickly easily access them and digest some of that information at your own pace and time. Just a quick pointer from me and the Innov8 team is that we are running another event at the end of May, which is on the 26th of May, which is around securing your business through IT, and you'll be able to register for that online. I know a number of people on here are already registered for that. And just before I finish off, Chris, you've got your hand up. Do you want to just jump in?
Yes, I just forgot one other thing. We mentioned TLS, obviously, in upgrades. And as Damien said, it is important to get upgraded. We have got in touch with everybody that needs an upgrade, we believe. But on that, although it does say 30 days from September the 30th, that's don't work off the back of that and think that you need to do it by nearly the end of October. That 30 days, so Sage doesn't check its license every day. If your Sage decides to check its license on the 30th of September, then it will last until into October. But if your Sage has checked its license on the 2nd of September, it will try again on the 2nd of October and stop working. So it's not necessarily an exact 30 days after the end of September. So we're trying to get as many people as we can upgraded before the end of September so that you don't lose any access to Sage. So if you haven't booked in your upgrade yet, do speak to your account manager.
If there are no further questions, thank you very much for joining us this morning. I hope it's been a worthwhile 30 minutes or so for yourselves. And yeah, thank you very much. And we'll look forward to welcoming you on the next Innov8 Insight.